How's it going, guys? Dave from Performance 360 and the FCC Coaches Program here. Today we're going to talk a little bit about strength training. So it's something that is written about a lot. Most people think they have a really good understanding of it. We're kind of taught that just lift heavy, you'll get stronger. And while I would definitely will not argue that point, I'll show you a little bit about what goes on into our knowledge of strength training, into how we're applying it to athletes, and how it's probably a little bit more in-depth than you might think. While heavy resistance training in a progressive manner is always going to get athletes stronger, it helps to understand the limitations of athletes, where they're benefiting, where they're not benefiting, so that you can be a little bit more involved and a little bit more in-depth with your athletes rather than just lift heavier to get stronger. So basically, it boils down to two forms of strength adaptation. We have functional strength adaptation and we have structural strength adaptation. Functional strength basically boils down to two parts. Motor learning, which is learning how to do a movement. We can't get strong in something until we learn how to do it. And the second part is neuromuscular efficiency. So learning how to do a movement and then learning how to do a movement well. So motor learning is something that's very big with beginners, and many programs often miss the mark is they take beginners and they put them into barbell back squats right away without there being any type of motor learning or movement patterning involved. And that's a very, very big mistake. People have to own the bodyweight squat, the goblet squat, and then be introduced possibly to the back squat. So without this motor learning, we're essentially trying to get strong on top of dysfunction, and we never want to do that. Second point, neuromuscular efficiency. Once this is all mapped out and people have a good understanding of their own motor learning, then neuromuscular efficiency, that is basically strength training. How our brain communicates to our muscles to create more efficient contractions and get ourselves stronger in a movement. It's why you see people get really strong without gaining weight, without gaining a substantial amount of muscle, because all the communication mechanisms within the body are communicating more optimally. Secondly, we have structural strength adaptations. So this is basically just a fancy word for muscle growth or hypertrophy. This is very important because neuromuscular efficiency at some point is going to tap out for everybody. If you think about the analogy of a general communicating to soldiers, the general would be your central nervous system, the soldiers would be your muscles. Communication here is going to be efficient to get people very strong, but sooner or later you're just going to need more soldiers to overcome more difficult challenges. So that's essentially what structural strength training does. The rep count changes, the tempo changes, how many times a week you perform it changes, as well as any type of assistance lifts that might go along with it. So while this is somewhat hierarchical, as far as most people are going to need to get motor learning down first, this also exists in a bit of an ongoing circular continuum spectrum, however you want to phrase it, because beginners need structural development to develop that base, but advanced athletes are also going to swing back around and need to hit structural adaptations if they really want to continue to focus on that strength as a main goal. So two forms of strength adaptation. Next thing I want to talk about briefly are going to be our influencers or our limiters of strength training. So if you think about the two forms of adaptation, these influencers are essentially going to determine the outcome or the results that you get for those two forms of adaptation. So in looking at them, first up, we have trainability. So this is kind of the depressing part of it. Your trainability is out of your control. These are genetic influences, the length of your appendages, whether or not you favor more power or enduring type workouts. It's the reason why you take somebody who is a long, slender distance runner and you take a football linebacker, you put them on the same strength training program, they're going to get different outcomes. That's genetic trainability. Dmitry Klokov, Matty Rogers, every single person that's in the CrossFit Games, Usain Bolt, Michael Phelps, etc. They are the top fraction percent of the population when it comes to trainability. Unfortunately, this is largely out of your control. The good news, everything else is within your control. So point number 2, neuromuscular efficiency. So Basically, this is going to factor into somebody's training because we are all on different ends of the spectrum with our neuromuscular efficiency. If you take a back squat at 1 rep and you perform 85% of that, you're going to get a reading as far as to how neuromuscular efficient you are. For those people who produce a very high number of reps at 85%, they're low neuromuscular efficiency. For those people who produce a very low number of reps at 85%, they're very high neuromuscular efficiency. How your body reacts to certain programming and certain rep schemes is going to factor in to this outcome, which is going to determine the level of strength that you get. Third point, biomechanical efficiency. So if you take a beginner or an advanced athlete, let's say somebody who has very poor ankle function and they spend time developing their ankle mobility, they get stronger in the back squat as a result of being better from the ground up and your connection with the floor being better and your line of force being better. They're getting stronger through biomuscular efficiency, not through strength training, not through lifting, but through their joints and the leverage characteristics of them operating more soundly. So this is an area where we can often get athletes a lot stronger without really any type of strength programming getting them to move better. People who cannot fully hold their arms up overhead without their rib cage flaring, they get more mobility in the thoracic over time, their overhead lifts become better and they become stronger. That's biomechanical efficiency. Fatigue. So this is a big one. What is your state of fatigue? We have more acute fatigue. I'm sore from today's squat training. I need to take a couple days off. And we have more chronic fatigue. That is when we ignore the acute fatigue. We compound our training efforts daily, thinking we're going to get a greater return through compounding, and we end up going backwards. Too much is too much. This is a bit of a do less type scenario, but we have to make sure we're managing our fatigue. Aerobic fatigue is a big one as well. People often think just strength training. There's no such thing as strength interference unless you are misdiagnosing your aerobic conditioning and you're going from conditioning straight into strength training and not allowing recovery. So long as fatigue is limited, your strength will not get interfered with your conditioning, and you'll be able to manage your strength training in a much more linear fashion. Last but not least, we have the speed strength continuum. So speed strength continuum moves from maximal strength to maximal speed with strength, speed strength in between. There's all sorts of different aspects of strength you can hit. We all know strength training isn't just 1 to 5% at 85% and up. We need to be lifting at lower percentages at higher velocities. We need to be lifting. We need to not be lifting. We need to be jumping. We need to be sprinting. We need to be doing things that complement the heavy lifting that aren't just associated with our 1 rep and with our slow, heavy lifts and even our fast, powerful lifts. There's all types of complementary measures along the speed strength continuum that are going to advance you regardless of where you are on that. So that's kind of the overview of how we view strength training and how we structure the programming of our workouts at Performance 360. In our FCC weekend in November, we go over this in much more detail. Strength training is uncomplicatedly complicated. It's easy to simplify it down to just lift heavy, which will work for a while until it doesn't. And at that point, we need to be prepared for all of our athletes to know where are their limiting factors, where can we get them better, and which form of strength adaptation is best suited for them for where they are with their fitness.